Hello, Brandon.
Hello. Might have been a lightly attended meeting today.
Yep, looks like not so many people plans to join. So I think it will make meeting shorter and more specific or productive. This is what the word I was looking for.
As long as you say so.
I was just kidding. Of course, it's better when we have more people in the discussion. But if nobody joins in a minute, we can start.
I'm curious. I was looking through the prototype one for was that the Containerd platform stuff you'd forked?
Yes, I
Something.
was. Oh, there's Christian.
Yeah. I was looking through that PR and you reference the platform compatibilities field, but since you're working on the fork of this, I'm guessing you're also working on the fork of the image spec somewhere.
Yes, exactly.
There we go.
Uh, I didn't push everything yet because I have some problem with permissions. I can create branches for platforms and for Containerd, but I cannot create branch for image spec.
Can you do a PR?
I can do a PR, but PR would land in the main branch.
You
So,
put up there against May and I'll move it over. I can
okay,
make the branch and move it over. That's easy enough.
sounds good.
I
So,
think I can. If I can't, then we'll work on it from there.
cool. So let me share my screen. Let's start talking about things in here. So the first topic I have right now is image selection prototype. I hope you can see my screen and it's clear enough. So what I basically did, I extended image spec. Where is that? I extended the platform structure with features, which was the idea of proposal that was E, I think. For using CPU features. So I think it's a good idea. And then I introduce a new field, which is compatibilities. This is kind of a mix of proposal A and proposal H because Joe was talking about introducing new field compatibilities and A was talking about defining some annotations on the Containerd side they can match with annotations defined on the image side. So that's why I think I create some combinations of proposal A, E, and H. So this is the fields I extended. So how it looks like right now, basically you have a platform. This is the index.json. This is here you have a platform with features and compatibilities field, where again you can specify CPU features, and in compatibilities you can specify anything. I'm not touching the labels topic here. I treat that you can put into compatibilities anything you want. So the algorithm how image should be selected would be we keep this as the most important part as it is right now. You check architecture, OS, and variant. Later, you look into features, and in the end, into compatibilities. So, for example, if you have features, uh, two elements of this array in here of the features, but um, in the other manifest, you might have just one element in the features and a lot of uh, elements in the compatibilities. Still, this is the more important because the this how much information you put about the CPU is more important than how much information you put into compatibilities. So first we compare this, then we compare that. In the end, you compare the last thing, compatibilities. Is that clear, or should I elaborate on that? I'm sure. I know I'm not
I'm
the best. Yeah,
I'm following where you're going there, and I think the way I would phrase it is that features is just a sub of the variant. And so everywhere you use variant to have some kind of selection, you would features just um, a sub level of that. And so
exactly.
it follows the same thing. I did want to ask a question though, because you're saying this is AE and H. And when I look at H again, I wanted to double check before I spoke too soon.
Mhm.
The compatibilities over there is not a string map. It is a
Yes,
array of string maps.
yes. That's very good point. So maybe from H, it's just the idea to put compatibilities into platform, but it should be a map string instead of array of map strings. It's like much more easier for the algorithm, and it's not so complicated. So if you would like to have, because I know why Joe defined that, he wanted to have array because if you have different CPU vendors or something like that, instead I would just do it in the way that if you have situation like that, you just create another manifest entry, reference the same digest, but you have different compatibility set and maybe feature set. That's how I would solve this in that case, instead of creating arrays of compatibilities. I think even we discussed this somewhere in the past. Uh, this
It
is
makes
not
sense to me. I just want to be careful that we don't say this is the implementation of H if he wants to come up with another one. If
okay.
he doesn't, he wants to leverage this, and that works too.
Okay. So yeah, I would be maybe a little bit more clear in the description of this proposal, uh, how we should deal with that. Uh, the prototype is not completely ready though, because what I just change platforms. I change matchers. So if you, for example, right now execute CTR images pull specific image, you will get appropriate manifest, but I have to still change one more thing in the container D, which is the way how you sort the results. Uh, the core image manifest. That this is executed when unpack function is being executed. Basically, when you run ctr run container something, then you have appropriate image selection manifest to be run, right? So you are then you have appropriate manifest to run as container, because if you are executing CTR images pull, you pull all the configs of all manifests that are in the index. But if there is no match, you just skip the layer. I can show what I mean exactly by that. I hope you still can see this.
Yeah, when I was looking over the code while you're pulling this up, I probably was thinking the same problem you're running into, which was that what if you have a match on something with capabilities, but you have a manifest without capabilities, or vice versa? when do we consider it a match and not a match in there? And it looks like you've got a very hard restriction on the compatibilities must be identical to each other.
Yes, exactly. If you specify something on the image side and you don't find this on the node side, meaning you don't find this on the container D side defined, then there is no match. It's a very hard requirement. And because I think uh, if you want to have some software requirements or so, you should define another manifest with software requirements. If you specify something in the features and compatibilities, I would always expect this is a hard requirement. And what I was referring to CTR images pool, uh, basically I realized I didn't know that before, that CTR is always pulling all manifests in the index, but just configs, even if there is no match. But if there is a match, then it will additionally download the layer. So it shows already that this prototype works, but I have to finish the part when you run container actually. So I will ping you
I'm
once I have, sorry.
just curious they do that because that gets them into rate limiting things with Docker. So I think I want to dig into more why they do that.
Yeah, there are options. You can be very specific about the platform if you want to be, but the default behavior is you pull every config that is in the index, only
Is
layers.
that is that the behavior if they don't get an exact match that they're falling back to looking inside the config to see if they can get a match that way?
I I didn't check
Yeah.
this kind of behavior, but I saw the comments in the code that the config is being checked for Docker or something like that for backward compatibility. That was comments by Steve who added in there, but it still doesn't change the way how it works. Even if they take a look into the config, uh, the heart of this is in the platform's code. So I think let's do it that way. I mean, I will finish this prototype, have appropriate branches, maybe record some small demo over this ASCII recording, and I will share with you. Then you can comment on the PRs, think if this is right approach or not. But I, at least to me, that sounds not so not so complicated, and you have a backward compatibility. If somebody doesn't like to specify compatibilities or features, the algorithm still works the same way, that you always get the first matching from the list. The trick here is that if you have features and compatibilities, is a matter of appropriately ordering the manifests in the vector. So that's the I think yeah, the way. Any comments to that, or do you want to wait for full code to be available?
Um, I've got thoughts in there. I've also got my own implementation of A, and I can walk through a little bit of that, which is not on container D, and so it doesn't have the same design, and I don't run into the same problems, I think, because of the way I'm doing it.
Okay. So you are going to create a pull request as well, right? For your proposal.
I've got the pull request sitting up there. I'll drop the note here if you want to have a look at it. I could also walk through and do a screen share on that if you wanted me to.
Sure.
Let me move this to a new window. Because this is an implementation on my own code, and so it doesn't really quite follow everything here. Let's see. Right window. Okay. So this for me, when I was working on it, I ended up for my compare routine, I added not just the host platform, but I passed a bunch of weights in there. This is an implementation of just A. Um, and so the weights was my way of saying for specific fields, I wanted to rank them higher or, more or less important than others. I don't have anybody using this other than the test code right now. Everything right now is just weighted at a 1 by default. And so that's where if it doesn't see a weight, instead of adding whatever the weight was, it just does a plus plus in there, which means everything defaults to 1. And then I have this little better function. And This is my variant of what the containerd does when they're trying to sort everything out, where they're trying to have a list of possible matches and figure out every possible match and then do a direct comparison against each one. My comparison just goes straight through the platform list and it says, is this better than the previous one? If so, keep track of it. If it's not, skip it and just go to the next one. So it means that I can go through with the better function, just do a short compare. Do I need to be able to expand this a little bit where it's in here, each thing is looking, hey, are the variants there? Is the variant even better than the previous variant? If so, then this is better. If it's not better than the previous variant, then skip it and go on the next one. So if I'm a V7 and I see a V6, well, I can work with a V6, but if I'm already at a V7, I'm not going to go downgrade myself to a V6. And then the prefer weight function is kicked in here, then is what I added. So this goes through each of the different fields. And instead of calling my compatibility, I called it prefer as my new field name. That's just made up right now. I'm not too picky on any field names. If I see something that they're both nil, I just ignore this and say, hey, all these things, nobody has a preferred field on there. We're the same weight. So return a 0. Otherwise, I go through and compare each of these and say, hey, for this prefer, what's that number? What's the other number? As I come out with this, I give an overall weight and say, I prefer this one with a weight of 5 versus another one that I was previously looking at might have a weight of 2. And then I say 5 is greater than 2, pick the 5. That's better weight. So the way this all comes out, I think is a little bit easier to look at. Let me do this. I'm going to open this whole file up. It's easier when the stuff isn't wrapped in lines too badly. The way this comes out is if I'm looking for, these are my test cases, by the way. If I'm looking at what's on the host that says, hey, I've got this GPU, I've got the sandbox I'm running, and I look at the previous one, just said I just had an AMD 64. The current one I'm looking at says I've got a GPU of this inside of this image I'm looking at. So this is the index entry it's going through and it sees that one. It'll say that target is better than the previous one. Go ahead and the better should return a true for me. Versus if I go through this and they're unweighted and everything's the same, and previously I had one that was a sandbox, now I have one that's got this GPU model. They're indifferent to me. Each one's a weight of a 1. I say it's not better, not worse, but it's not better, so I'm just going to keep the previous. And so the expect better comes back and says, no, it's make that a false. And versus the last one here, which went through a whole bunch of these things, and I passed my mapping into the compatibility. And so I mapped my weights and said, hey, the runtime is a weight of 10. So when I see the new entry in there, it has this new runtime with that sandbox that matches my host sandbox, I'm going to prefer that one over the GPU. So that was the method to the madness in this implementation, is that it just has that better function in there that just, when it's going through the list, if it sees something better, it locks onto that. Does that give you a somewhat of a high level idea what was going on over in this implementation? Any?
Yeah, yeah. I think I get a good picture of that. So if we would like to extend a new this algorithm with containerd, for example, I think that would be a possibility because you can define a new matchers, right? But we would have to agree how you extend the image spec because we have a difference in here. You are, if I understand correctly, very specific how to solve these collisions. I would say that if you have the same entries that there is no better, there is no wrong. You just stay with the one you have right now, and it can be random if you don't define any weights in here.
Yeah, the challenge we're going to run into with the containerd implementation is that they have some generic logic in there. I'm moving the wrong thing. Pick this thing and move. As they're going through their vector list and whatnot they create, they come out with a list of platforms that they want to compare to, and they do an exact match against each one. And so because of that design, they're solving a much more generic problem, and it makes it a lot more difficult to solve our problem with this generic implementation, because they're going to look for this exact match of all the compatibilities to be identical between the two. Or you'll probably have to make an extra entry in here that says, okay, here's one without the compatibilities, here's one without the features, to be less and less generic. And they're saying, hey, if you see
Yeah,
one that doesn't have all those, that's fine. The real challenge is you're going to have a CPU out there that's going to be a V4 that'll have all the V4 CPU instructions, it will also be a V3 with a bunch of CPU instructions that would have been in V4.
Mhm.
And you can't do an exact match on that. You have to be somewhat soft in
Yeah.
that match to be able to downgrade through those different variants.
Yes, you're right. I mean, this is the downside of the proposal I made. That I thought at the beginning it's gonna be a simple ordering based on features and compatibilities, how long those arrays and maps are. But you are right. If you that V3 could be um, like upper on the list than V4 if you are more specific about features or compatibilities than for V4. I'm
But
also wondering. Yep.
you also need a way to list all of these features in here, and they're looking for an exact list of features where you just want to say, if I see a bunch of features that exist that I have, then those are all good. And it's not easy to put that in there because of the way they're doing the exact match.
Uh, if I understand correctly, the way how I would deal with that, if I build an image, I put, let's say, AVX 512 and some other feature, let's call it foo. Uh, I would have to define on the container D side like that those both features exist. So I'm not sure if I follow correctly the concern you have in here, because as a user, I don't have to describe all the features that image manifest has. I just care about what is defined in the manifest of during the build side, and I have to just see if there is the feature exists on the node that has been defined by some sysadmin.
But
If your
but
concern is
don't you
that
have to list every feature that's on the host? So
you don't.
you're building this list of specs platform based on whatever the host currently is. So you go
Uh,
in here and say, is the platform that I'm currently trying to match an AMD 64? Okay, here is the list of things I need to be able to potentially match inside the index.
no, it's more manual. If I can share my screen again, I will show you how exactly
Okay.
is being done. So for instance, let me first open a file that I introduced also in this proposal.
I'm
For the
still seeing a black screen. I don't know. Christian, are you seeing a share yet?
No,
oh,
it says has started screen sharing.
let me start again.
There it is.
Okay. So I hope you can see it right now as well.
Mhm.
I introduced this config file, containerd platform config, where you specify capabilities and features of the host. So if you, for example, specify here AVX 512 for CPU features, it's enough if your image, not this one, I'm looking for the manifest file here. If it's enough if you just specify that your image requires also AVX 512. I was saying that this is similar to proposal A because you don't have to list all of available features on the node. You just have to meet demands that you expect. For example, when you have to just expect on the node uh, or different way.
So let me show you
Yep.
something.
Okay.
We're going to go back and forth here. Christian's going to have fun seeing the screen shares go back and forth today.
No worries.
The dueling banjos with Zoom sharing here. So when you look at V4 in
Mhm.
the AMD spec, the way they've implemented, they've got EAOX, and this might be really small. I can bump this up a little bigger here. They've got some of these other V3 features. They've also got the HI something 16, the OSC, MH, yada, yada, something other. If you say you're V3, or if you're going to match on a V3 image, you could also have any of these features from the V4.
Mhm.
And if you're to say, give me something that, if my image is a V2, it could have any of the V3 features like the BMI, the AVX, all these other things in that list of features in
Yeah.
the index. And so you've got an arbitrary length, not quite arbitrary, but you've got a very long length and you've got a whole bunch of possible permutations that list could have in there under the
Okay.
v2 if you're running on a v4 host.
Yes. Yes, you are right. You are right.
So that's the fear I've got, is that feature list, if you're looking through the index and you say, okay, I'm running on a v4 host, I've got all the bells and whistles on here, and then you try to match something like that, the feature level, you've got an arbitrary linked list. You kind of need to change the way their logic works to be able to say, I can be up to a v4, or I can have any of these other features in here as well that I can match against.
Yeah, to be honest, I was mostly caring about what users define, what's not the official list of features provided
Yeah.
by v4 and how they relate to each other.
Yeah,
I
but
was relying, yeah.
there's the input to that comes in that says, here's the host that I'm running on. Build that list of all the possible platforms I can run against.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
And they kept it real simple at first because it was just ARM 64. Then they got the ARM 32 and they said, well, we have a V7 and V6, and we've only got a length of like 4 on our list here. This isn't going to be too hard to work with because they're just a couple of major versions. Once we become granular, that list of things they're going to do a hard match against becomes very long and arbitrarily ordered too. You don't really know what the right order is in there.
Yeah, that's true. There's this possibility that you would have to be there are a lot of information that not being reported about this, and the algorithms have to be improved, which is already messy.
Hey,
Damn
your
it.
words, not mine. I'm not going to criticize them.
Well, nobody said it would be easy.
No. It's the concern I have, and I'll end up going down the same path you have at some point, is going through that code. I worry that you're almost going to have to deprecate some of the old stuff, or just say, hey, this old code doesn't support the new stuff we're going to do, and here's the new algorithm, and please migrate all the implementations over the new implementation that works completely differently.
So if we, for example, follow your idea that you introduced, the way how I understand it could be used in the container D. Let me open this. I'm not sharing my screen. Let me share my screen.
Doing the black screen thing again.
Oh no.
Maybe we shouldn't be dueling Zoom screen shares. Every other one doesn't work right. There it goes.
Okay, the second time. Cool. Because you have this new matcher that you can basically override everything, the behavior of platform. So we could basically create new matcher out of this what you are suggesting, and that would mean we would have to as well. That's container D.
They also try to do a full ordering, don't they?
They do.
And I don't think we really need, for any of our stuff, we don't really care about the full ordering. We just care about the best.
Yes. So if we were about to follow your idea, we would have to extend the CTR and somehow pass a new possibility to introduce your new matcher. That I imagine this as maybe an option if you want to follow all backward compatible algorithm or the new way with weights and so on. There was some.
Yeah, my fear, and maybe there's better ways to do this. I haven't dug into the code enough, but I've seen at the high level to see some of the roadblocks I was going to run into. My fear is that we're just going to have to end up deprecating their implementation and build a new one that has new features in it. And the end result is anybody who doesn't upgrade to the new one just doesn't have any of the compatibility features. And that's not the end of the world. It's not great, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, there's always some downside, right? We just have to somehow force people to move on, to move forward, because I don't know.
It is possible in Go to mark a method or whatever is deprecated. And so that then it gets picked up by the liners that say, hey, you're using deprecated code. Please follow the instructions they put in the comment here.
But the ultimate backwards compatibility is that the registry just recognizes it and filters.
So the registry is completely hands off on this.
Yeah, but
The
I
reg
mean, I wrote a. I need to pick it up again, but I wrote a registry that filtered the list of images based on annotations. And with this approach, the client doesn't need to do anything, right? If I know that those groups of clients from this IP range or whatever, they need this kind of platform, that this kind of compatibility, then I can just serve them different images or provide them a filtered list of the index that only provides them with what they need. But of course,
I
I
think
would
that would
change the signature and such, so that's kind
I
of
think that would
dangerous.
work if you own both the registry and the clients. But as soon
Yeah,
as you get into a Docker Hub kind of scenario, I don't think that would apply too well to them because they don't know what the clients are they're connecting to them.
that's true.
So yeah, I was looking for the part of the code where CTR is initializing the matcher. There was some part of the CTR platforms, new matcher or something like that, where they, yeah,
Mhm.
using the default one, but doesn't matter right now. I will take a closer look at your proposal, Brandon. Probably you're going to follow that
Yeah,
maybe better.
it's sitting in a draft. I'll throw the link over in the chat here, or not in the chat, but in the HackMD notes, so that folks who want to look at it, it's a draft PR sitting in my own project right now that I'm kind of sitting on thinking about, and I still need to go back and probably update a little bit, but it is there. So I'll throw it over
So,
here.
so the prefer field is a map, right? String.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I could basically put there anything I like. For example, if because
The idea was I couldn't have the annotation copied across everywhere because it was going to be part of the descriptor, not part of the platform field.
yeah.
And the descriptor contains the platform field. So I needed to put another name in there just so it'll be passed around.
Okay. Okay. That brings me to the second topic, which I'm trying to explore, registry sub-indexes, because we are talking about index size limit and how much metadata we put in there. But I'm trying to figure out how it works for everybody. Again, I'm not sharing my screen. Let me try. Can you see something?
Nope.
Nope.
Turn it off and back on again.
I think that's my Firefox. I have old Firefox on Mint
Yeah. Second
Linux.
time's a charm every time.
Anyway, yeah, what I was talking about is that this is my main index, right? And if I create a tag with different manifests for different architectures, then media type is not image manifest anymore. It's image index. So under one tag, I have a reference to another index, and in this final index, I have different manifests for different architectures. That's how it works right now. And I was trying to figure out,
Ignore the top level index there because that's kind of a quasi different thing. So completely ignore that. Focus in on whenever you tag one of these things, focus in on that SHA-611 that you're looking at.
yes,
That's the one that you're going to hit the limit on because that's the one
exactly.
that's returned to
Mhm.
clients.
Because I think if we have like multiple those sub indexes, because I was afraid that in the main index, if we put all the compatibility metadata, we may have
Yeah,
a problem with the size limit.
this index is not where that's seen because this is a different kind of thing. This is very specific to the OCI layout. This
Okay,
isn't the index that clients tend to see on their side.
because
So it,
I think right now, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
this is the one you want to be looking at. And so I would focus all your attention on this and just forget that other index even exists.
Okay, so in my opinion, right now, I don't think we are going to hit a limit currently with that because the granularity of those indexes which we are concerned of, there's a lot of them for per tag, and you have limited amount of manifests per architecture. Eventually, you could put different variants for the same architecture and duplicate some metadata, but it should not be a big overhead. And I was asking Christian about this because he had this idea of annotations if he was hitting the limit in the past. But as far as I know, Christian, you didn't have a problem with that, because if we
No.
have a scenario that we can put like metadata of compatibility into your preferred field, then we don't need any artifact and anything in there. Basically, that would be for us, for telco. I've discussed that with guys. That would be a good solution, and we don't need basically any artifact. We just pull the index that is interested for us, and based on the metadata we have in there, we can use this metadata for cluster provisioning. The main reason I was thinking about artifact was this index size limit. But when I was playing with more and more with registries, I realized that there is this sub indexes, as I call it, and it granularity is good enough that I think we should not be afraid of size limit, because
So
yeah, sorry,
each one of those sub indexes is really, that sub index is your index.
yeah.
Just that top level index.json is the tag listing API implemented in an OCI layout.
Exactly. So that's why I think we should be fine, because I was just afraid that in this OCI index, the main one, here,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we would be
Yeah.
in
Don't
problem.
think about that one so much. The reason you have to be careful about the size limit is it depends on how much metadata we want to put inside of that individual, what you're calling a subindex, the
Yes.
actual tagged index there. How much metadata you put in there becomes important. And so if you put in there what is needed to distinguish between multiple images so you can pick the right image to run, I don't think you're going to hit that limit too often. Users do crazy things, but for a
Yeah.
vast majority of cases, I think we will fall well under that limit. If you try to put all the detail about the build host in every one of those platform fields, I think you could start seeing some issues. And so that's
So,
where I'm trying to be careful of saying, let's not
uh-huh.
throw the whole kitchen sink in every one of these descriptors that says we built it on all these machines out here that have, 32 CPU with, 20 gigs of RAM assigned to them running in a VM inside of, Azure's cloud somewhere. We don't need all that data. We just need to know the difference between one index entry and the next index entry
Mhm.
because that's all we care about. We're just trying to differentiate.
I see. Uh, from the telco side, we were always thinking about that as a minimal requirements of the image. We never had intention to put the whole dump of the host and put all the metadata in compatibility, because that would be crazy even for us. And yeah, being honest, we just plan to put informations like maybe 50 lines of key values that you have something like this in the 6-wind router. But I can only speak for telco. I cannot speak for any other users, so I cannot predict what they would do there. But you would need stuff like that, like for example, what kind of kernel configuration you need, some capabilities, um, kernel modules. So it's not that much of information. We don't want to store the user configuration. We just have to define what it takes that container can run on the host, minimal requirements. So I would probably, I'm not saying
What you want to
right,
do is completely reasonable. So I'll say that, your direction you're going, perfectly reasonable. I don't think a registry is going to care about it. If you build the structure there, though, users will abuse it. And so you have to be careful of, okay, with what
yeah,
we built, how can it be abused? Because registry operators are worried about that case. They're not worried about your case. They're worried about
yeah,
how is someone going to abuse this? Because we need to put the guardrails up there that they can't abuse it on our registry server.
yeah. I'm quite biased in here, and I can speak only for myself. I cannot speak for others. I understand that concern, and I wonder if there is any way of limiting, because somehow you have to deal with this, right? I mean, either you put
The
a
the registry today limits it by just as soon as you try to push a manifest beyond the 4 gig limit or 4 meg limit, not 4 gig, the 4 megabyte limit on a manifest, they'll just reject the manifest. But you you come into issues where not every registry has the same limit. So now you have manifests that might not be completely portable. Some registries might say we'll go all the way up to 8 MB. And so the less we run into that, the better, because the less we run into portability concerns and users hitting limits they didn't know existed.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, because I cannot promise, let's put it that way, if we are introducing this prefer, I cannot promise that telco will not also use it for their own purposes with this kind of requirements we have. But at the same time, this is just a proposal. I'm researching and also telling guys from my organizations that we have to do it reasonable. Like we cannot put everything in there and trying to be reasonable itself about that. At the same time, uh, it brings me to the last topic: artifact prototype outside of OCI. I started talking to NFD guys, Eduardo and Marcus, because I think from my point of view, it doesn't make sense. From my point of view, it makes sense to create something under OCI for all containers or under NFD instead of putting some kind of new project and trying to convince everybody to use it, if that makes sense. Or maybe I should rephrase that. This is a bad sentence. What I'm saying in here is NFD has everything already. It has node labels. What you have to do, you have to just translate this and put it on the client side and use what's already provided. They also have scanners implemented and so on. So it makes perfect sense to create this prototype under NFD. But it brings one issue. It's only for Kubernetes, uh, which is bad. But this is a start point, right? So if we prove under Kubernetes that is somehow useful, I think in the future we could go back to OCI or transform NFD to be not only Kubernetes specific. That's how I think about this right now. Because creating all of this from scratch, artifact, coming with the labels where exists in NFD, coming with the same implementation, how you scan the nodes if to discover features and so on, doesn't make much more sense. Probably I will change my mind once NFD say go the hell out of with this. We don't want this, and then I have a problem and I will have to create something outside of OCI and NFD. But the idea I have right now is just to try to convince NFD guys to move forward with that. Eduardo was kind of positive about this. I will talk to Marcus on Wednesday. But what I want to say in here right now, for artifact use case, I will be probably moving with NFD. So if anybody is interested in that, uh, I think we would focus in this working group mostly on the image selection, and for all other stuff, probably under NFD organization. If guys there would be welcoming the idea. Otherwise, we have to build something from scratch. And at the same time, I'm going to kind of research how telco would use this prefer field that you introduce, Brandon. Like, I need to see some uh, see how people would basically use that and how much data they would put inside and so on. From the discussions I had and examples I received, it's not much metadata. It's just a critical. But as we spoke, it's only from telco side, and we will see how this is gonna go.
Someone
Yeah.
found a way to abuse it.
Yeah.
In general, your last point, though, I like the idea of going to NFD, and to your concern that it's not OCI specific, that it's Kubernetes specific. My inclination there is to say, go ahead and make it Kubernetes specific to start with, and then see if or how people come in and say that they need that same functionality outside of Kubernetes. And then we can start to look at it at that point.
Basically, there is already use case because telco is not only about Kubernetes, also about OpenStack and different orchestrators that run containers. So that's why in the first place, we came here into OCI. But it's okay. We can start with Kubernetes. We can also gather some feedback, how people are using that in the Kubernetes, if they have the same requirements, so on. And then if there is a need, I mean, there is a need, but if we have like better implementation of that, we can think how to take this outside of Kubernetes, if it's OCI or maybe NFD being transformed to something not Kubernetes specific. Like this is a long-term plan, so we will see how it's gonna go.
I mean, thinking through that scenario, how difficult would it be for OpenStack to leverage the NFD metadata from their side?
Good question. Basically, that would be. I think that I don't know much about OpenStack, to be honest. I just know that there is a requirement for that. So yeah, I just cannot answer that.
I don't know it either, so that's why I'm asking the question.
I installed OpenStack 7.5 times and it worked half the time. So back in the day. Yeah.
I just worked with OpenStack 10 years ago, a little bit with some APIs, and that's all.
I
gotta run.
glanced at it here and there. You have to run. All right. Thanks, Christian.
Thanks. See you next week.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Marcin, I think, yeah, in general, I think your starting point is the right way. And so I think you're going along the right path there. NFD and Kubernetes, let's see how that works over there, if there are any issues. And then if you need to, then take that to the next step and you run into problems trying to extend that in OpenStack and there's a better way to do that between both environments, then let's bring it up then. But I think you'll, if nothing else, you'll probably learn a lot from just setting up NFD to work with an artifact in Kubernetes.
Yeah, that's a good starting point. Let's see how this is gonna go. Cool. So I have no more topics basically. So have a good day, Brandon. Then.
You too. Take care, Marcin.
Take care. Bye.